Yuvavani, yes, it's an open forum for the new generation. Today, we have some interesting programs charted out for you. First, it's an interview with Parvathy Salil. She's a young poet with amazing writing skills, and she's well known in the literary world across the globe. To know her closely, listen to this interview. She's been interviewed by Gauri CS. It's really worth it.
Good evening. Today, we have with us Miss Parvathy Salil, a successful young poet who is just 21, has already published 2 collections of poetry. Welcome, Parvathy.
Thank you.
Parvathy, for the listeners who are not familiar with your work, would you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am a student of liberal arts at Ashoka University in Haryana now. So I'm doing the Young India Fellowship now. And I've been publishing poems for the last 9 years. And last week I published my second book, the one I never knew. And yeah, that is it.
Could you tell us a bit about your family and your background?
Yeah. So my mom is an assistant professor at SN College, Kumaragam. And my dad is a senior regional manager of Sun Pharmaceuticals. And I have a brother, and he's in the final year at IHM.
Okay. So why poetry? How did you come into poetry?
Initially, I used to write essays. I had a teacher who was very passionate about poetry. Her name is Miss Rajeshwari. So she started teaching poetry, and she told me that I had a flair for writing. And then she encouraged me to read more poems and recite more poems, and somehow I just started writing poetry.
So when did you realize that you wanted to publish your works?
So I used to write like small write-ups in the Hindu young world. So that's how I started. But then a little later, I wrote few poems for poetry competitions at school and for the school magazine. And it was like very fragmented, like, thoughts incomplete and all of that. So that's how I started. And then by 11th and 12th standard, I wrote a lot, and that's it.
Okay. Your first publication, Rhapsody, was published when you were just 18.
Yeah.
So how was that experience?
Rhapsody contained poems that I wrote when I was in the 11th and 12th standard. I was very unhappy while doing science in 12th standard. I've always wanted to study literature since that teacher taught me. And then I was very upset because science was never my thing and I was so bad at it. And I always used to feel unhappy and frustrated. So that's how I started writing. So by the time I completed my 12th, I had my first book ready. But then I could only publish it when I was in the second year of college. Yeah.
Did you find it very difficult to, publish it as a new writer?
Yes, I approached a lot of people, and the response I got was poetry doesn't have a market, especially if you are a budding writer. So I was very disappointed, and it took a lot of time. So though it was completed around 2014, I published it only in 2016. So that was very, very hard, and I actually had to self-publish it. So yes.
What kind of themes or what are the subjects for your poetry? Is it personal or is it something that you observe? What is it?
It is both. So in the first book, it was predominantly nature. There were poems on 4 themes: love, life, nature and women. But then after second year of college, the kind of poems that I used to read changed. I began to read poems by Eliot and Yeats and Pablo Neruda, Stephen Spender, Sylvia Plath, Maya Angelou. So the kind of poems that I used to read changed, and then the kind of poems I wrote began to change.
And you've recently published your second collection, which is The One I Never Knew. And it featured a blurb written by our esteemed Member of Parliament, Mr. Shashi Tharoor. So how did that happen and how did you feel?
I met him last year during MBIFL, during his book launch. So I was working on my second book, but I did not really expect that it would happen. So I approached him while I was getting the autograph signed, and I asked him if he could write, and he was very curious, and he asked me how long I've been writing. So I got an appointment to meet him the next day, and he skimmed through it and he said, there's a lot to improve, but it's okay and it's a great start. So he asked me why poetry, why literature, and I told him this is something that I tell everyone, that if I want to do something in life, that is, I want to write poetry as long as I live. and I want to teach literature, and I'm very, very, very passionate about literature. So it's a part of my life, and for the last 9 years, my identity has been the girl who writes, and I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, could you tell us a bit more about The One I Never Knew, what the reader should expect from it?
Yeah, so The One I Never Knew consists of poems on different themes, but the predominant theme is intolerance. And I strongly believe that the two values that the world lacks today are respect and acceptance. So if all the whites could accept the blacks, if all men could accept women, if people can accept each other, there would be peace and harmony in the world. And I strongly believe in that. So actually I started writing the second book when I watched a documentary on Syria. And what I saw was a mother was carrying a baby through the midst of the rubble and running away, all of that. That was the first poem of the book that I wrote. And then whatever I saw, a lot of things, I really love to walk. In fact, I love yellow streetlights, and I've written it in the book as well. So things that I see, and I used to travel 3 hours to college and back. So I had a lot of time to see and think and write while I was traveling on the bus and on the train. So that's how it started. Then like a lot of poems on nature actually. And intolerance, like love jihad, then rape, all of this. So, yeah.
So you use your poetry as a kind of tool to speak against all these violences, these discriminations. So do you feel that poetry should always be used as that kind of a tool or more for pleasure?
I think it's both, because when you sit down to write a poem, you're not thinking about, I should write a poem that would delight the reader. You just pen down your thoughts as it comes, and editing and, structuring comes much later only. So sometimes when I feel very happy, I'm enjoying the rain, that would be the kind of poem that I would end up writing. And if I see something bizarre, if I see something very disturbing, for example, one day I was on the train and I saw a few transgender persons being treated very badly. And that's how I wrote the poem, Let Me Live, I'm Human. So it just, sometimes you think about something, or you come to know about something, or you hear about something, and that stays in your mind and it disturbs you so much that you really have to write it out.
Who's your favorite author? Do you have one particular favorite author, or one particular poem, or one particular piece that inspires you so much?
That's a very hard question, because it's very different. There was a time when I used to be obsessed with John Keats, because I used to love, not that I understood it completely, but I loved him so much after reading Thing of Beauty It Out.
Who's your favorite author? Do you have one particular favorite author, or one particular poem, or one particular piece that inspires you so much?
That's a very hard question, because it's very different. There was a time when I used to be obsessed with John Keats, because I used to love, not that I understood it completely, but I loved him so much after reading Thing of Beauty at school in 12th standard. That's when I started reading all his odes, Ode to a Nightingale, Ode on a Grecian Urn, or poems like La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, all of that. But then now I can't say one author. I read Eliot. Again, all these poems are too hard, and I'm not saying that I understand it completely. I do have to refer it as well. But I love to listen to poems recited by Tomo Bedlam. I listen to a lot of poems on YouTube recited by Tomo Bedlam. And I can't say one writer. In poetry, again, I read Eliot, Plath, Blake, Shelley. A lot of poets actually, I can't say one writer. Recently I started reading Kamala Das a lot, and I'm like so in love with her poetry.
You've been reciting poetry for quite a long time, from your school days itself. You've been appearing in various kalotsavs and competitions, intercollegiate fests, and have been grabbing more and more prizes. So how are you as a reader? Now, when you're reading your own works to the audience, how do you feel?
Some of my poems echo anger. So for a very short time, I have done few roles. Though I'm not really good at acting, it actually helped me to learn to modulate my voice a lot. So I love to bring that effect into poetry when I recite it.
Could you please recite a poem for us?
Yeah, so this poem is titled Away She Sauntered in Syria. So this is the poem I said, a mother carrying the baby. And it goes like this. Amidst all strife and heaps of corpse, bloodstains, bizarre rows of woe, she strolled, sewn pose, her baby close in the warmth of a bosom, stream of tears, ascetic than acids, frozen with fierceness, numbness of pain, knowing that no wail can soothe her or please. She babbled and wiggled, begging for mercy. Nowhere to go, nobody to rescue. She wandered and wandered, her baby held close to her bosom. Beaten, bruised, abused and cursed, ripped and torn, bitten to bits, soaked in blood, flesh fresh and red, iced with love. She ran, she ran.
Wow, that was amazing. I'm sure our listeners could also feel the angst that you felt when you saw that scene. As a student now, you're studying at Ashoka University. I'm sure it's a busy schedule, so how do you balance between your studies and writing poetry?
Yeah, so at Ashoka, they prefer creation of original works. So it takes a lot of time and it's very hectic as well. Initially it was very hard, but then once I got used to the schedule, I do get my time to write poetry. So it just comes, it just happens.
So are you planning on some new work or a new collection perhaps?
Usually it's like I keep writing for 2-3 years and then I come up with a book. Not that I don't write often, I scribble what is in my mind, but then I don't feel like every poem is fit for publication. So in the last book also there were nearly 60 poems that I wrote in the last 3 years, but then I published only around 30-35 poems in the last book as well. So I don't have a plan as such now. I have written 2-3 poems after the publication of my second book and let's see where it goes.
What do you plan to do after your studies now?
I'm very focused. I'm a person who's very sure about what I want in life. So there are 3 things that I want to do in my life. One is that I want to study at the University of Oxford. Second is that I want to write poetry all life. And the third one is that I want to teach literature all my life. This is my ultimate aim in life. So after completing the Young India Fellowship, I really want to join Ashoka University. After that, I'm thinking about doing another master's or PhD in literature and then join to teach literature. That's it.
Okay. So all the very best for that. Being the girl who writes.
Yeah.
How was it? Like in college, among your friends and all, after you published your first book, how was it?
Yeah, that is all that I wanted in life actually. Everywhere I go, people just ask me, oh, you're the girl who's published, you're the girl who writes, right? And I cherish it. I really cherish it. That's all that I want in life. People know me as a person who loves literature. Plus, there's another thing, like there were a lot of friends and relatives who were very unhappy with the fact that I chose to do literature. Because, you have this belief that either you have to go for engineering or medicine, and I had to go through the same pressure. And when I started studying literature, I lived every single day of my life. I was so happy studying it. I got very high marks, and it was not the marks part, but the satisfaction that I was getting out of it was amazing. So when I go in front of people who ask me why literature, with that frown on their face, saying, oh, you published 2 books now, I feel so happy when I see that. So yeah, literature is my identity and I cherish it.
It's very good to see that you're a very optimistic person. I hope all your dreams will come true.
Thank you.
And, how do you feel about the negative criticism that you get? Have you ever encountered some really harsh kind of criticism from your online followers and all?
Yeah, once in a while I do get messages like that. But see, even when I read a work, I don't like all the authors that I read, right? So that's absolutely fine. I don't expect everyone to love it. I would like to answer that with 2 quotes by Maya Angelou. Every time I deal with criticism, this is how I take it. One is where Angelou says, you can shoot me with your words, you can cut me with your lies, you can kill me with your hatefulness, but still I rise. One. The other one, again by Angelou, she says, nothing can dim the light that shines from within. So, and I believe in these 2. So it's like there would be a lot of people who would criticize no matter what you do, and that's okay. So I think I'll focus on good feedbacks, or just the fact that I'm doing what I love itself is enough for me. So yeah.
How do you feel about the present day scenario where writers are forced to write in one particular manner, or their works are being banned? How do you feel about that?
Okay. So I think the Constitution clearly says liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship. So I really don't know why writers and their ideas should be curtailed. I believe in liberty, and I strongly believe that writers should have the freedom to express whatever they wish to. So yeah.
Like Mr. Shashi Tharoor said, I hope that you will be a shining beacon of hope for all of the future poets and writers to come. And from the part of the listeners and everybody at the Yuvavani, I wish you all the very best for your future endeavors. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.
That was Parvathy Salil conveying some of her experiences as a young poet. I'm sure her experiences would be quite an inspiration for the coming generation. If you have an eye for nature, if you have a mind to capture the in-depth voices of people, if you have the power of a pen in your fingers, go for it, my friend. Scribble, jot down the nuances of life. After all, life is beautiful. I hope you liked Parvathy Salil's interview. Coming up next, you can